Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Happy 2025. I am here with a new radar video for you. If you're new around here, this is where I share with you upcoming new releases in categories of books that I like to read. So that's often literary fiction, translated work, memoirs, books about feminism, and a few other non-fiction titles that interest me. So this is not a shopping list by any means or books I plan on buying or reading all of them, but I just like to share what's new and what's caught my eye in case it catches your eye too. So start of the year is always an exciting time for debuts and new authors, especially January, February, March. And I've got a real range of books here and quite a few that I have proofs of, so I will be reviewing in upcoming videos. So I guess let's get started. The first book I have to share with you is Something Rotten by Andrew Lipstein. This is a book published by FSG on the 21st of January. And it's set in Copenhagen. So it says, Cecile is a fed up New York Times reporter. Her husband, Ruben, is a disgraced former NPR host and a grudging stay-at-home dad. Neither can wait to flee New York and spend the summer in Copenhagen, Denmark, Cecile's hometown. But their vacation begins to turn inside out as soon as they land. Cecile's first love, Jonas, has been diagnosed with a fatal illness. Cecile's friends are desperate to get him help, that is, except for Mikkel, a high-powered journalist who's the only one Jonas will listen to. His influence extends to Ruben, who's not only intoxicated by Mikkel's charm, but discovers in him a new model of masculinity, one that he found hopelessly absent in America. He indoctrinates Ruben with even more depraved stunts and senses something serious is amiss. Cecile questions who she can trust and even herself. Drawn in by the gravity of her past, she can't help but stray onto the road not taken. A twisted and thrilling tale of loyalty and deceit, lovers and fools. This sounds messy as hell. Americans living in Denmark for the summer, illness, complicated feelings, exes, and I'm not sure, it's quite unclear about the model of masculinity if we're talking about conspiracy theory, kind of Joe Rogan style things, or something completely different, but I'm very intrigued. I also love the cover of this, it's striking. Okay, a book I've seen a few of my friends reading over on Bookstagram is Confessions by Catherine Airy, published on the 23rd by Penguin. This is a debut, an intergenerational family story of three women. It's set between New York and rural Ireland, so that's a big tick for me. In late September in 2001, the walls of New York are papered over with the missing. Cora Brady's father is in there, the posters she made taped to columns and bridges. Her father died long ago, and now she, orphaned on the cusp of adulthood, she is adrift and alone. Soon a letter will arrive with the offer of a new life, afar out on the ragged edge of Ireland, in a town where her parents were young, and a strange aunt can provide a home and fulfill a long-forgotten promise. But there is a story of her family which is hidden, and a presence which will begin to unspool. Sounds fascinating. I love an Irish immigration story, and Ireland to New York is such a well-trodden route. You would have seen one of my favourite books of the year was In Ordinary Time, which traces that exact path in a very similar time too. So sounds fascinating. Family secrets, migration, loss. Yeah, big ticks on there for me. And of course, a debut author as well, which we love to support. Is it a sophomore novel? Yes, from Nicola Dinnan. This is Disappoint Me. I loved Bellies by this author last year or the year before. No, it must have been the year before, as in not 2024, but 2023. Still feels weird to say last year and mean 2024. But I enjoy Bellies a lot, and so has everyone I've spoken to about it. And this is her debut novel. It says, Max is 30, a published poet and a grossly overpaid legal counsel for a tech company. She's living her best life, or is she? In the debris of years of dysphoria and failed relationships rattle around her head when she tumbles up the stairs of a New Year's Eve party and wakes up alone in a hospital. She decides to make some changes. First thing, a good stab at old-fashioned heteronormativity. Enter Vincent, a corporate lawyer and hobby baker. His trad friendship group may as well speak a different language to Max, and his Chinese parents never pictured their son dating a trans woman. It's uncertain terrain, but Vincent cares for Max in a way that she's long given up on a foolish fantasy. But Vincent has his own baggage. On a Gap year to Thailand a decade prior, he vies for the attention of gorgeous traveller Alex with secrets of her own. Is Vincent really the new face of an enlightened man, or with ghosts of his past that will sabotage their happiness? Nicola Denham writes these stories about trans women in a very contemporary and modern context, about young trans people her previous novel was about, and about relationship building in a heteronormative world. They're very readable and consumable stories, but they have so much to say, so I don't doubt that this is going to be brilliant, and the early reviews of it I've seen are so too. She also often in her previous novel wrote about, I believe the character was a British Malaysian, and talks about East Asian identity when it comes to transness, and it sounds like this will be similar with Max's parents being Chinese. So yeah, really fascinating context and really readable and well constructed storyline. So this is one I will be purchasing when I see it. Okay, a new book out from Emily Austen. I don't know if I hate or love her stories. I read her most recent book before this one last year and listened to it on audio, and I liked it, but it was so bizarre that I think by the end I was fed up. But this one caught me by the title because it says we could be rats, and my partner and I have an ongoing joke about rats, so yeah, I think it could be fascinating. It says a story of two sisters, a love letter to childhood, and the power of imagination. Sigrid hates working at the dollar pal, but has always resisted the idea of growing up and growing into the trappings of adulthood. She did not graduate high school, preferring to roam the streets of her town with her best friend Greta, the only person in the world who understood her. And her older sister Margaret is baffled and frustrated by Sigrid's inability to conform to the expectations of polite society. But her detachment veils a deeper turmoil and sensitivity. She's haunted by the pains of her past, from pretending her parents were swamp monsters when they shook the floorboards with violent arguments, to grappling with losing Greta's friendship to the opioid crisis ravaging their town. She sets out to understand Sigrid and the secrets both sisters in their own time find their own ways to discover. Their childhood imagination is the only way forward. So I imagine this might be quite strange in places, playing with the idea of imagination and dreams and memory, which I'm not sure if I will love. It's one I will wait to hear where other people come in on, but I do enjoy the sister relationship. Sounds like it could be good. Okay, then we have Homeseeking by Carissa Chen. This is published on the 7th by Penguin. I think it's a US publication. This is an epic intergenerational family saga. Think Pachenko, the Joy Luck Club, definitely in that sort of ilk. It says, Hawen is buying bananas at the 99 Ranch in Los Angeles when he looks up and sees his Suchi for the first time in 60 years. To recently widowed Hawen, it feels like a second chance, but Suchi has only survived by not looking back. Suchi was 7 when she first met him in their Shanghai neighborhood, drawn to the sound of his violin. Their childhood friendship blossomed into soul-deep love, but when Hawen secretly enlisted in the Nationalist Army in 1947 to save his brother from the draft, she was left with just his violin and a note that said, "Forgive me." This follows the separated lovers through 6 decades of tumultuous Chinese history, war, famine, and opportunity, taking them to the song halls of Hong Kong, the military encampments of Taiwan, the bustling streets of New York, and sunny California. The story from past to present, and her childhood too, meeting at the crucible of their lives. At once epic and intimate, a story of family, sacrifice, and loyalty. Super fascinating. Pachenko's like one of my all-time favorite books, to trace a country's history through all of that political turmoil and complication through the eyes of one family or one couple. I think is such a brilliant and beautiful way to learn and to enjoy storytelling. I also think it's such a masterful way to write novels. Like, it's so impressive to me to produce these epic tales. So yeah, I think this sounds good. I think it's over 500 pages, but I could really see myself picking this one up and enjoying it. Then we have Dark Motherland by Samrat Upadhyay. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation of that. I couldn't find a reading of it online. But this was published on the 7th, also by Penguin. And this is also an epic big family saga, but it's dystopian, which isn't always my thing, but I think I am drawn to these stories when they're really well written and often tackling like the climate crisis and these big existential questions we have as we live in what oftentimes feels like the end. So this is, and the author is Nepalese. So this says, a novel of infinite embrace filled with lovers and widows, dictators and dissidents, paupers, fundamentalists, and a genderqueer power player with her eyes on the throne in the earthquake-ravaged dystopian reimagining of Nepal. At its heart, we have two intertwining narratives, one of Kranti, a revolutionary's daughter who married into a plutocratic dynasty and becomes ensnared in family politics. And then there's the story of the Dark Motherland's new dictator and his mistress, Rosie, who undergoes a radical body change and grows into a figure of immense power. This is a romp through the vast space of a globalized universe when personal ambitions are inextricably tied to political fortune and where individual identities are shaped by pressure and social reigns, where the East connects and collides to the West in brilliant and unsettling ways. This sounds way out of my comfort zone, but something about it really appealed to me. I've been reading quite a few non-fiction books in the general Southeast Asian regions, and I've never read a book set in Nepal, and I've also never been to Nepal, but one of my close friends just came back from there and shared such wonderful photos and stories and experiences. So this would be a wonderful way to transport myself there, and particularly in this dystopian reimagining, and the political intrigue is something I want to read more of in my fiction. So this could be a great pick. Again, I think a pretty long one. Okay, we have Good Girl by Aria Ava, published by Bloomsbury on the 14th. This has been getting quite a lot of buzz and press. This is a book set in Berlin in the nightlife scene. It says, when techno rattles the buildings, still scarred with the violence of the last century, 19-year-old Nyla finds her tribe. In the company, she can escape the parallel city that made her, the public housing block packed with refugees and immigrants, where the bathrooms are infested with silverfish and the walls are graffitied with swastikas. Escaping into the clubs, Nyla tries to outrun the shadow of her dead mother, a once feminist revolutionary, her catatonic, defeated father, and the cab driver uncles who seem to idle on every corner. To everyone who asks, her family are Greek, not Afghani. And then she meets an American writer, Marlo Woods, whose literary celebrity, though fading, opens her eyes to the world of patrons and festivals, one that imbues her dream as the life as an artist with new possibilities. She's drawn into his orbit, and ugly, barely submerged tensions begin to roll and claw between the city's cosmopolitan veneer, and everything she hopes for, hates, and believes about herself will be challenged. A portrait of a young artist in the cauldrons of sex, drugs, violence, family, friendship, and grief. So yeah, sounds like it will be complicated and an interesting character study. Sounds like there's a lot of conflict there about identity and migration, and in a very turbulent time in Germany. So that is a Good Girl. Okay, we've got Nesting by Roshan O'Donnell. This is a debut by an Irish writer, set in Dublin, and it sounds like it reminds me a bit of the book I read earlier at the end of last year called Breakdown, about like a woman who gives up on her life, and I find that in equal parts appealing and terrifying. And I read a few books last year with that kind of trying to outrun your own life story, and I find them, if they're well written, really, really enthralling. So this says, on a bright spring afternoon in Dublin, Kira Faye makes a split decision that will change everything. She grabs a armful of clothes from the washing line, her two young daughters in the car, and then drives away. All she knows is for certain is home is no longer safe. This was meant to be an escape, but with dwindling savings, no job, and her family across the sea, she finds herself adrift, facing a broken housing system and a voice of her own demons. As the summer passes and the winter closes in, she must navigate raising her children in a hotel room, searching for a new home, and dealing with her husband's relentless campaign to get her to come back. Leaving is one thing, but staying away is another. So yeah, this sounds incredibly tense and sort of gritty and dark in places, but it's got 91 reviews on NetGalley with 5 stars. So I think this could be brilliant. Okay, then I love the cover of this. This is Hope by Andrew Ridker. This is published on the 30th by Duckworth Books. My partner read this over Christmas because we had a copy on my Kobo. And this is a family saga, like all-American white picket fence saga with a crumbling family secrets under the veneer, which that's a subgenre of family saga that I really enjoy. It says the Greenspan family are the envy of Brookline, Massachusetts. Scott Greenspan is a successful cardiologist and his wife is a pillar of the community. His daughter works at a distinguished New York publishing house and his son is in medical school to follow in his footsteps. They are an exceptional family in exceptional times. But when Scott is caught faking blood tests, he sets in motion a series of scandals that threaten to shatter his family. A funny and tumultuous account of a year in this family by one of America's brilliant young novelists. So yeah, a family saga set over a year. Tasty, kind of like one of my bread and butter types of stories. Another book my partner read over Christmas I didn't get to is The Persians. This is published on the 30th by Fourth Estate, and it's a book that Fourth Estate seem very excited about and are talking a lot about, again, an intergenerational family saga, but this is an Iranian-American family, I believe. It says, first there was Elizabeth, the regal matriarch with a famously large nose who remained in Tehran despite the revolution. She's kept company by Niaz, her young Islamic law-breaking granddaughter. But in America, Elizabeth's two daughters have built new lives for themselves. Shireen, a flamboyantly high-flying event planner in Houston who considers herself the family future, and Seema, a dreamy idealist turned bored housewife languishing in Los Angeles, and her other granddaughter, Beta, a disillusioned law student in New York, trying to find deeper meaning by giving away all her worldly belongings. Spanning from 1940s Iran into the splintered 2000s, an irresistible portrait of a unique family in crisis, following the questions of love, money, art, and fulfillment. So I don't need to know much more than that. Family secrets, intergenerational migration set between two places, two cultures. Fascinating. Okay, this one just put on my radar because I don't know the last time I read a book about ballet, but when I was younger, some of my favorite like YA or even middle grade books were about ballerinas. I didn't dance as a child, I was a gymnast, but something about it I always found very glamorous and sort of illustrious. So I guess that's why these books appeal to me. This is City of Nightbirds by Jahia Kim. This is published by One World on the 9th. And it says, a once famous ballerina makes a devastating choice to return to the cutthroat world of Russian ballet that broke her or walk away forever. Prima ballerina Natalia Levanova was once celebrated across the world, in demand on stages from St. Petersburg to Paris and New York, but at the top of her career, a mysterious accident forces her to retire. Injured and alone, she's haunted by the relationships with two other gifted dancers, Dimitri and Alexander, who were responsible for her soaring highs and her darkest hours, and ultimately her downfall. Dimitri resurfaces with a tantalizing offer to Natalia. She must decide whether she can face her past with a chance to dance again and return to the great love of her life, a vivid portrait of a world with ruthless ambition and desire, unveiling the makers of a dancer with intimacy and scope. So yeah, don't know why part of that just really fascinates me, that whole world, that peek behind the curtain of a sport and an art that I am not a part of. Okay, out with Repeater Books, which are a small press in the US, I believe. This is Taipei at Daybreak, published on the 14th. Coming-of-age novels set amongst the social protests of the early 2010s in East Asia. Like I say, I've been reading quite a lot of books and listening to quite a lot of podcasts about various countries in South and Southeast Asia. I'm desperate to visit Taiwan and have followed closely the politics in the last few years there. So this is set in 2014, in and around the Sunflower Movement. So this says, in 2014, a veteran of Occupy Wall Street arrives in Taiwan and finally finds what he's been looking for in the Sunflower Movement, a grassroots campaign of militant young people looking to overthrow the existing government. Setting up an online newspaper, Daybreak, to represent the movement to the outside world, he battles with self-destructive and violent impulses that drive him to the front lines of the protests, and his nihilistic streak is fed by those around him, a host of other citizens, activists, journalists, who travel together in the depths of the Taiwanese night when the ghosts of its repressive history loom large. A unique blend of reportage, memoir, meditation on the unseen forces, personal and political, that propel people to the edge, a coming-of-age novel like no other. So yeah, I just think this could be brilliant. And I love a book that centers on a political movement through the eyes of an individual. And like I say, I've been fascinated in reading a lot about the various social movements and politics of places like Taiwan. So yeah, that's why that's on my radar. Okay, then I have one short story collection to share with you. Okay, and this is a kind of madness, which, can we take a moment for this cover? This is the most perfect shade of green to me, and I love that single tear. Wonderful. This is published by Verve, I think, in the UK, and it's a short story collection set around and in Nigeria. So this says, a one-eyed chicken, a chimpanzee forgotten in a cage, babies with hydra heads squished into pulp, everyday madness and monsters are explored at the backdrop of an indifferent Lagos in this dynamic debut collection with 10 stories dipping in and out of the lives of Nigerians, unraveling the tensions between mothers and daughters, husbands and wives, siblings and more. Brimming with vitality, these bites of mundane madness mark the arrival of a new voice in fiction. So I think this plays with magical realism and folklore that is commonplace in Nigeria and looks at, slice of life, but with extraordinary difference. So I think this could be really, really brilliant. Okay, on to nonfiction. I just have a few coming out that I'm interested in this month, but there'll be plenty more to come. This is Land is All That Matters, The Struggle That Shaped Irish History by Miles Duggan, published on the 14th by Head of Zeus. This examines 200 years of the agrarian conflict from the ruinous famine of 1741 to the eve of World War II, exploring the pivotal moments that shaped Irish history, the rise of moonlighting, the infamous White Boys and Right Boys, insurrection of Captain Rock, and the Great Famine of 1845 that devastated the country and drastically reduced the Irish population. It looks at events taking place across and with the backdrop of the prevailing British rule with stark class and wealth inequality. So I don't often read history books from this far back. I'm much more of like a 20th century interested in history, but I think so much of this is the bedrock of obviously the next century of Irish history, which is what I know and read a lot about. So I think this is important and informative, and particularly on audio, I think it could be pretty good. Okay, then I have more of a non-fiction. It's not white collar crime, but kind of like more business economics. That interesting, I swear, because I'm not one to be reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. This is The House of Huawei, The Secret History of China's Most Powerful Company by Eva Doe. This is the untold story of the company that shocked the world. So the author is the tech reporter for Washington Post. So they obviously have a big sort of background in the topic, and they said they've previously spent 7 years reporting at the Wall Street Journal in Beijing and Taipei, and they're currently based in Washington. So this pieces together a remarkable portrait of Huawei's reclusive founder and how he built the sprawling corporate empire, one whose rise Western policymakers have been increasingly obsessed with halting, based on interviews and painstaking archival research, dissecting a global net of power, money, influence, surveillance, bloodshed, and national glory that helped to build Huawei and that has also ensnared it. You will remember perhaps quite a few news stories featuring, I'm not sure about whether it's the founder or the director, ensnared in quite a few lawsuits in recent years. Like it says, something that policymakers are extremely concerned about, but it's like the most successful and the biggest company in China essentially, but a lot of it is connected to the state, and then a lot of geopolitics goes into that as well. So I think it could be a really fascinating listen and one I will be waiting for patiently on audio. Okay, then I have a book about chronic illness published by North Atlantic Books. This is called Being Sick Enough, Thoughts on Invisible Illness, Childhood Trauma, and Living Well When It's Hard to Survive. This says it's a look at living with trauma and chronic illness. This writer and meditation teacher offers smart, funny, raw, and mindful insights on untangling and embracing the realities of being a human. This looks at her personal history, the adverse childhood experiences that wired their body and brain, work addiction, and things that kept their pain lying just below the surface, how trauma and illness obscure the knowledge that we are each enough wholly as we are. This memoir explores the parts of chronic illness that don't get enough airtime, how we can center sex and pleasure when pain gets in the way, how we can live through late-stage capitalist hell, and how we come into a relationship with our pain without falling prey to self-blame, magical thinking, and toxic positivity. I really am intrigued about the way that this author deals with these concepts of blame and childhood. There's mixed and controversial research regarding adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and their link to autoimmune disease. And I'm intrigued to see, particularly as this she's a writer and meditation teacher, so she's not a scientist or a doctor, how she talks about those things, but it sounds like it could be a really interesting set of essays, so we will see. And finally, a new non-fiction book out from Fitzcarraldo, who are one of my favourite publishers of both fiction and non-fiction, but particularly their non-fiction I always find reliably brilliant. This is Precarious Lease by Jacqueline Feldman, published on the 30th. Sorry, I keep forgetting to say names and dates. This says, on the 31st of December 2012, Le Bloc opens its doors. Situated at the far edge of Paris, the legendary squat was 8 stories tall and 4 basements deep. It took in artists, activists, as well as immigrants to France from various corners of Europe, Africa, and the Americas, all who lived and worked within Le Bloc's labyrinth structure, continuously threatened with eviction and existential as well as financial precarity. Jacqueline Feldman, a reporter from the US, spent a number of years with the residents of the squat, witnessing firsthand creativity and grief inherent to everyday life there and the gradual dismantling of Paris's counterculture. With the title itself referring to the French legal device by which squatters would receive a temporary reprieve from eviction but were reduced to the status of property guardians, this tells the story of Le Bloc. In the tradition of Walter Benjamin and with the journalistic attunement of Joan Didion, Feldman draws on Paris's revolutionary and bohemian history to raise the questions of the most contemporary urgency about hospitality, refuge, idealism, utopia, creativity, ecology, and the possibilities left for writing and inhabiting a capital city. This sounds so fascinating. I think the revolutionary history of Paris linked to writers and artists and creators is so fascinating, and there's so much to unpack there, all centered around housing and precarity and late-stage capitalism. I think this is going to be so brilliant. So if I find this at my local bookstore that stocks Fitzcarraldo, it will be coming home with me. Those are all of the 17 books I have to share with you. There's books that are coming out in January that you're excited about. Please comment them down below and tell me if any of these are interesting to you. If you could like this video, it also does me a huge favour, particularly as my uploads were a little sparse recently. And subscribe if you'd like more book content and vlogs about life in Amsterdam, chronic illness, and knitting. Those are all things we do here. I hope you're having a wonderful start to 2025, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.